Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the first chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus and his disciples went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit. And he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent, and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, "What is this? A new teaching, with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord. So from the time that we were children, most of us knew how a good story was supposed to begin. A really good story is supposed to begin something like, "Once upon a time in a land far away." Or perhaps even better, "Long ago in a galaxy far, far away." All of our great fairy tales and science fiction stories begin like that, and it makes for a really great story. True stories, on the other hand, always involve actual people. People that we know and we can see. And they happen at times that we can find on our calendars and in places that we can locate on Google Maps. Problem is that often our biblical stories recount events that sound fantastic and too good to be true. They sort of start to sound like fairy tales or science fiction. But unlike other true stories that we know, our biblical stories are usually set in a time so long ago that it sounds like something that happened long ago in a distant land. And the places that they happen in places that we're so unfamiliar with that very often they seem like a galaxy far, far away. And the problem is actually exacerbated by the fact that very often the biblical stories do not precisely identify where they're going on, what the place was. So if you travel around in the Holy Land and you go to see places, very often it's not clear exactly where this thing took place. So when I was in Israel doing a couple of Holy Land tours over the last couple of years, I would go to places where they would say, "Well, we know where the Sea of Galilee is, it's here, and we sort of know generally it was around this place, but we don't really know where because the biblical stories don't tell us." Even though you can go there, and if you're near the Sea of Galilee, you can find a rock on which there is a plaque which says that the Lord himself sat in this exact spot when he broke the 5 loaves and shared the fish and fed the 5,000. We have no idea. We have no idea because the Bible doesn't tell us where it happened. Even when we kind of know an area where something might have happened, it's hard to tell precisely where. So you can visit the Mount of Transfiguration where Jesus was transfigured before James and John were here, all that kind of stuff. And you can visit that mountain, but there's 20 other mountains around there. You're not quite sure which one it was, and the Bible doesn't say. And even if you actually know the general area, like the temple, Jesus was in the temple, that means he was on the Temple Mount. But the Temple Mount's a pretty big place. So on Super Bowl Sunday, most of us are familiar with an idea of about how big a football field is, right? So the Temple Mount is the size of about 3 football fields. So you can go there and you go, it happened here someplace, but we're not really sure where. So in today's gospel reading, something really unusual happens. And it's not that Jesus cast out demons. Jesus cast out demons all over the time, in lots of different times. What's really unusual is that Mark precisely identifies a specific spot, an actual building, where what Jesus did took place. He identifies the synagogue at Capernaum. What's more unusual is that that building gets mentioned in 3 different Gospels, even though it's a little place in a little town. That building, that synagogue in Capernaum, is a place where Jesus did things which somehow affected people's lives, which changed people's understanding of God. God did something in that actual specific space. And perhaps the most unusual thing of all is that we actually know where that building is, and you can actually visit it and see it today, which is really unusual. And since maybe you have not been there, I'm going to try this again and see if it comes up so that you can actually see the synagogue of Capernaum that's mentioned in today's gospel reading. There are actually only a couple of different places where you can go in the Holy Land and where you can say, you know what? Jesus was actually here, right here in this space. And I'm going to hopefully lead a tour in the end of 2016. And if you come along on that tour, you'll see only a couple of places where I'll go, yeah, this could actually be the place. And yeah, he's working with. And this is one of them. This is the synagogue at Capernaum. But in some respects, you can even see the actual space and you say, well, so what? The building doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that Jesus cast out demons. It is not all that big and impressive. You can see the guy walking through the door, and so if you get the eye, you can take a look and see that the space inside that building is about as big as our sanctuary in Narthex together. It's not a very big or impressive place. And of course, it doesn't look exactly the way it did when Jesus was there. What you're actually looking at here is most of the white is all 4th century synagogue. We think they had more money because they could build it out of limestone and marble. The foundation here is the foundation of the first century synagogue, where it was mostly built with these black rocks, like everything else in the town. So, it wasn't a particularly impressive building at the time. But see, here's what made this particular spot kind of important for me when I visited it. Being able to see that building reminds me that God works in actual, real places in our lives, not in fairy tale castles. And the very fact that this building isn't all that big and not all that impressive and located in a relatively obscure village is a reminder that God can and does work in ordinary, regular places. The kind of ordinary, regular places that we find ourselves in each and every day. That building was a reminder to me that God works through regular, ordinary activities. And the folks that were gathered together in that building that day were gathered for the same reason that we are. It was just their regular weekly worship. They were not gathered because they thought it was the Super Bowl and it was the place to be, you know. It was just their regular events of their regular lives. And it was in the context of the regular stuff they were doing that they experienced God working in their lives. And that building reminded me that God works through regular, ordinary people. Now, of course, we read this story and we go, wait a minute, that wasn't a regular, ordinary person. This was Jesus, the Savior of the world. And you can actually see places where, like, Jesus stood here, this was Jesus. But you know, to the folks gathered in that building that day, Jesus was just one of the people in the congregation. Gospels tell us that Jesus lived in Capernaum for a while, or at least based himself there. So he was probably there week after week, all the time. And you see, when he started to teach with authority and he cast out demons, people were astounded. They weren't astounded. They wouldn't have been astounded if they had gone, well, of course, this is Jesus. He's the Holy One of God. They were astounded because they go, this is Jesus. He's just one of the regular, ordinary people that we have in our synagogue. God was working somehow through him in a way that people did not expect. An ordinary person in an ordinary place at an ordinary event. So what's that mean for us? Part of what makes the reality of this building and this story really important is that it reminds us that this is not just a neat story for us to hear and say, oh look, this is cool. Long ago and far away, God did something. Rather, it's the reminder that as followers of Jesus, each one of us is called each day to consider that God is working in the actual, real places where we live, during the actual real events in our lives and through ordinary, regular people like each one of us. So, as cool as it is to kind of look at pictures and think about what Jesus did, the actual place is a reminder to ask ourselves, where is the real actual place you find yourself in? What could God be doing or about to do in that real, regular place you live each and every day? Your home, your place of business, your school, the place you hang out with your friends. What could God be doing in that actual real place that is no more spectacular or extraordinary than that little synagogue was to the people in Jesus' day? That actual building is a reminder to us to ask ourselves each and every day, what's the ordinary, everyday event that you participate in that God could be working through? What's God doing that you could see if you just paid attention? What are the ordinary activities that you're involved in? The stuff that you do at work, the stuff that you do with your neighbors, being part of the homeowners association, the least likely thing that you might see God working in. These folks were just gathered to go to church. What are those events that God could be working in? And maybe that God could be working in because God has you there to do those things through. And that's maybe the most important thing we're supposed to ask ourselves. How could God be using ordinary people like us to be the instruments of healing and hope in the lives of others? People were astounded at Jesus. But the first thing, if you notice in the story, that they're astounded by, they're amazed by, is not the casting out of the demons. They're amazed at his teaching because he teaches them with authority. What does that mean? In some respects, all that meant was that when Jesus started to talk about God, he talked about God with such confidence in God's immediate power and presence in the real world that people said, wow, God is really real to this guy. God is really present for this guy. That's new, that's unusual. Lots of people talk about God. Jesus actually projects confidence in a relationship with God. How could each one of us do that in our daily lives so that we'd be able to be the same kind of people who God can work through to actually bring help and healing and hope into their lives? So how can you project confidence in God's presence and power in your life each and every day? What's the actual place that you're standing in, which could be a place of healing and hope in somebody else's life? And what everyday activities and events are you involved in that God can be a part of, simply because you're there and God can work through you? You know, this season in the church here is about celebrating the light of Christ coming into the world. But it's not just about remembering what happened in the past. Instead, it's about recognizing how the light of Christ is still being made known, here and now, through us. It's about being open to being bearers of that light in the real, everyday places in which we live. And it's about looking forward with hope and with confidence to God's continuing presence in our lives and in the life of the world around us.